All right. Hello, everyone. Nate here with Neil Prouse from American Eagle today. Looking forward to do an overview of the news release with the looks like the wrap up of the high grade gold zone, as well as some continuation intervals that we've seen between the north and south connection, as well as some guidance on the end of season wrap up here today. So, Neil, it's good to see you. It looks like you're fresh and off the site there. How was the season wrap up?
Good. Yeah, it's taking a bit of a hiatus for now while we're waiting for some results. But yeah, no, it went really, really smooth. Yeah, really, really good. Camp was great. Um, and yeah, we've got some pretty nice stuff to sit on, I think. So we're yeah, all happy to be out of the field for at least a little bit and get refreshed.
Nice. Yeah. Of course, we're waiting on the assays for anything in the north, but looks like you guys have some descriptions here that we can go over here. But off the hop, let's take a look at some of the results from the expansion of the high grade gold zone. So largely, we've seen in the past some of the historics in that area, but now you guys are pushing the frontier on that. You want to touch a little bit on, we'll say 28, 26, and 24?
Yeah, so those holes all collared within the historical South Zone. 26 and 24 collared from the same location as 21 and 23 from the previous news release. 24 was a shallow hole drilled at a minus 55 uh, and pushed almost due north with the hole deviation. And the idea with this hole was to kind of put it right down a long trend of the corridor between the south zone and the north zone that had only very sparse drilling intersecting it perpendicularly. There'd be no holes that drilled down it, with the exception of hole 2, which was a steeper hole and collared a bit further to the south. And it showed some pretty good continuity, though it did hit porphyry stock rock, and we know the grade drops out there a little bit. 24 stayed almost entirely within our conglomerates and our sedimentary rocks, and it showed quite a bit more consistent mineralization throughout its length, especially getting down deep, kind of below where we ended hole 4 in 2022. So it traversed about 700 meters strike length from the south to the north and hit very strong mineralization at the top and bottom and pretty consistent mineralization throughout it as well. Like very, very few intervals below that kind of 0.2 equivalent and quite a few peaks within there of just broader, better mineralized rock with decent gold grade and decent copper. Bornite veining, bornite disseminations, local zones of pretty dense chalcopyrite disseminations. So very encouraging to see on that kind of scale, especially between these two zones.
Right. Yeah. I was noticing that 24, with it being colored the way it is, such, it really drives that home, the connectivity of these two zones. Let's talk about 25 and 22, though. Looks like maybe perhaps they were called a little further west than was able to pick up anything that was expressed to surface.
Yeah, so the surface mineralization isn't as strong out to the west. If you got 22 there, um,
25 and
it's
22. Yep. Hmm.
it's still within the broader system. Like there's still coarse veins that are encountered every so often within that zone. So it's not like it's completely dead, but the host rock itself isn't as well mineralized as it is when we get a little bit deeper and kind of below 350 meters. Uh, in these holes that are collared out to the west, the grade starts to pick up, and you start to see these higher grade spikes within it. And then when we get marginal, the porphyry stock, when we start to see our conglomerates and our sandstones interrupted by dikes of the granodiorite, same thing in hole 22, yeah, as well as hole 25. We start to see some much higher grade, especially within those rafts of sedimentary rock that are kind of sandwiched in between the diking there. So
Mm.
you see some pretty unique styles of mineralization as well. We see what looks like almost skarn-like replacement. It looks like there's some carbonate that's being replaced, and you see bornite mineralization, chalcopyrite mineralization within that. And we see other skarn-associated mineralogy within that too. We see some epidote, we see some garnet within it. Um, so that's pretty interesting. That shows us that, when you have the right composition of host rock in the right position within the system, you can get some really, really high grades forming. So it's pretty good to see.
Right. Okay. Well, that kind of touches on some of the results that we've seen here to date. Let's talk about, well, first thing first, about the southwest and the south, now looking southeast developments of the gold zone. So with hole 28 now complete and 36 in hand, so what is your expectations for 36? Is it going to be more in line with 28? I was reviewing the previous hole 9 too for some of the gold grade consistency that we're starting to see in this zone. Is that something we can look to possibly see there as well? I mean, we won't know until assays, but is that
We
looking like a
won't
development that you see?
we won't know until assays, and the gold is pretty cryptic in this zone. As I was telling Tony earlier, the mineralization in hole 28 is, especially throughout the best grade portion of it, from about 40 meters to 140 meters. Yeah, if you want to bring up that zone, there is an overlap of really kind of traditional for NAC stockwork mineralization within that pink interval, the granodiorite stock. And then right below 100 meters, we get another about 50 meters of really, really strong gold and slightly higher copper grade in this sedimentary breccia. It's a coarse, angular fragments of really just dark altered sedimentary rocks, really strongly magnetic. And there's this very fine bornite through it. You cannot see it on the core bench. You've got to take it outside in the sun under hand lens, and you can see these really fine bornite grains, and that runs really, really strong gold when we get those results back. So it's pretty difficult mineralization to pick out,
Okay.
and it seems to run with a very similar gold to copper signature as the stockwork mineralization, the quartz vein stockwork we see in the intrusive rock that's kind of immediately uphole from it. Hole 36 hit a lot of, it did not hit very much intrusive rock, at least not granodiorite stock intrusive rock, aside from the very top portion of it.
Hmm.
There's a lot of really dark, really magnetic, altered sedimentary rocks that we're interpreting. Uh, with some pretty good XRF signatures. And now that's pretty tough to go on, right? I don't want to, I don't want to come off as over promotional there, because again, we really don't know until we have the assays. But the gold is pretty cryptic in this, uh, and it bears a pretty strong similarity to what we saw in the XRF signature, at least at the top of hole 9. So that's good to see, right? We know that has the potential to carry some gold. Hole 9 actually had some pretty strong gold grades in it, and it visually it didn't look like all that much. Uh, I would say visually 36 was a bit stronger looking than hole 9. There was some nice zones of coarser chalcopyrite veining. There's the odd bornite vein throughout it. So we're still within the system there, and it's about 160 meters step out from the collar of hole 28. Um,
Yeah, I'm hearing that. I'm noting that of course, yes, you have the larger step out here, but then with hole 9, I think this is what I'm hearing is it bodes well for the potential to all this to be, somewhat linked up or connected, right? So
well, there's a
that's
big
good
volume
news.
of rock in there that is yet to be. Hole 9 is drilled up to the northeast, and it's still
Hmm.
500 meters away again from hole 36 collar
Hmm.
location. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of rock left to test in.
Okay. We'll come back to that because I have a question near the end here that we can touch on it because, yeah, it's yeah. There's a couple questions that came out of this news release. That's for sure. I've got one I definitely want to come back to. So, okay, let's go back to coming up results now. Then, so we have in hand everything now done on the west side. It looks like, except for I think 27.
Just waiting
But
for
before we
27.
get,
Yeah,
yeah, before we get to that, let's talk about. I've been calling it the inner zipper here. I believe we have. I think this is 31 and 20. Can't recall the
20,
numbers here. Yeah, they're not
29.
labeled,
Yeah,
but these are all new as of this year, right? So yeah, 29, 31, and then I'm not sure these two whole numbers off the top of my head. But as far as follow up to 22, 18, and 20, as well as I think you have a step out to the east of 17. Um, did
right.
those holes, yeah, how do those holes complement what we've done on the west side? I fielded a few questions. I have a few questions of my own with regards to are these two better line up with the IP signature where we saw some of the better results out of the finish of 2023 there? or yeah, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on these inner holes and what they were looking to aim to achieve.
Yeah, so the idea with these holes was to infill our information at surface. And there's still a pretty big gap between the collar of 22 and 25, and then where we have our holes from 2023 and 2022 along that porphyry stock margin. So there's about a 300-meter gap in there where there is no information. We know a distance of even 100 meters on surface can have pretty radically different results in there. So it's getting us more information in there, and then it's also allowing us to really refine the geological model. Mineralization wise, we've also been pretty pleasantly surprised with some of the holes along there. The whole offset of 17 hit very similar visual mineralization to what we hit in hole 17, and we know that bodes pretty well. But then there was some pretty nice intervals of coarser bornite veining in 32 and 34, which are a bit further to the north as well, along with some broader zones of disseminations. So pretty interesting geology and mineralization to come out of those. And I'm hoping it's going to show that we've got some grade closer to surface as we get closer to the porphyry stock. And it kind of fits that sort of wrapping around the porphyry stock shape that we see emerging here in the mineralization footprint. Yeah, we don't have assay results back for any of that stuff yet, so it's not incorporated into the model. But yeah, it's been good to see, and it's been really good to get that information, especially from a characterization and modeling standpoint. It's good to get that information and incorporate the mineralization we see with the geology we see.
Okay. Yeah, great. Yeah, so those will likely be some of the next batches to come up. I guess we're still in the 20s here, right? So we'll have 27 and 29 here, I guess would be the start of these in-step ones. So those will likely
Yeah,
be in the next batch of assays, right? Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, well, let's shift gears now and now talk a little bit about some of the developments in the north. And the first thing I wanted to flag was with around, I brought it up for hole 12. And hole 12, I just wanted to note what it terminated in with regards to last year's results with the pickup in gold. And I was comparing that to hole 24. Just bear with me here for a second because I believe I have it. Yeah. So in hole 12, we were looking at the termination at the end there with regard to the overall gold grade there at around, I think it was the higher grade, around 344 to 880.
Mm-hmm.
Was in around that 0.16, and then flipping over to the results of 24 at the termination there. Bear with me and just jump around a little bit. Yeah, I was noticing that the gold grade was picking up, and I was wondering if that had any implications with regards to the results that we saw. Well, visually, we saw some of it and spoke to it with hole, I believe it's 33. Is that is that jiving with regards to what you guys are seeing there, or does that have any implications for 33 that we reviewed at the time? See if I can bring.
Well, there's also hole 30, which
Okay. Yeah.
pushes further to the north of hole 12, and that's in between 33 and 35.
Right.
So 33 is the furthest north one there. That's the one you're highlighting
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I think I
And
have
the
it here.
one further to the south there is hole 30, which kind of gets it crosses right along the
There we go.
bottom of where hole 24 hit.
Right. So
So
I'm with here. Keep going. Yep.
yeah,
So 24 is just shy of 33, but into
the
30.
mineralization within that was very consistent with what we were hitting down deep in hole 12. And that was granodiorite stock, but with a much higher frequency of bornite and chalcocite veins and veinlets cutting it, and fracture hosting cutting it. And then there's still the odd raft of really nicely mineralized sedimentary rock within there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we can see hole 12, basically everything below 350 meters was very strongly mineralized. And visually, that's kind of the same story from hole 30 and 33. 33 is a little bit different because we hit that hydrothermal breccia, which we did not hit in 30.
Right.
So it's a different
Okay.
mineralization style. Difficult to say what it's going to run. XRF wise, it's also a little bit harder to gauge because a lot of the sulfide was very prominently like sulfide mineralization, right? And we try to hit the ground mass when we do our systematic XRFing because that helps us pull together our rock chemistry a lot better than if we're just blasting sulfides. So it's also harder to tie that together as well. So it really is a matter of being cautiously optimistic, waiting for the assays on this hole before we jump to any strong conclusions. But again, optimism is the key word here. It's really good to see that texture of mineralization.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be observing, of course, waiting for 30, but then I'll be looking to do that follow up to see if 12, as we see now, 24 is improving on that where it terminated, and of course, if 30 is seeing some improvement over that. I like to think of it as like a yellow brick road situation here with regards to the gold content. But yeah, so visually 27 and 30. I mean, 27, I'm assuming because it's a step to the west of 12, may not see as much of the grade expressed to surface here, but then visually probably similar to 12 with regards it terminated in. And then 30, yeah, look forward to seeing, like I said, the where it terminated in, but then also what it has expressed to surface. Um, but yeah, now let's jump to some of the question marks around the language here for the north. For where we left off last time, of course, we were very interested and excited to hear about the results of this breccia in 33. But what really got my attention afterwards, and I was thinking about it, was around what was described as a broad interval of disseminated bornite in a newer style felsic intrusive. So I see you guys have put some language to that, but I'm also seeing some language specifically around that disseminated vein-hosted chalcocite. And that's something I didn't have on my bingo card, but I was wondering if you can clarify it for me. Is that to do with, pardon me, the results of the description you were telling me here with regards to bornite with sooty rims around it? Is the sooty rims now assaying out to be or been identified to be chalcocite?
There's been some preliminary microprobe work. We sent some samples down to look at the composition of the bornite grains within it. And again, this is still early, and we're waiting on final reports, especially concerning the actual modal abundance of things. But it does look like there is chalcocite rimming the bornite dissemination. So at
Wow.
least at least locally, right? Bear in
Yep.
mind this is from you send in a 20 centimeter chunk of core. We're not sending down entire boxes. Just how the analysis works. So that's very, very encouraging to see. Um,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Definitely. The
and
implications of
yeah, and
of having
broad
disseminated and vein, like we've seen some vein hosting of chalcocite, but I think this is the first mention of anything with regards to dissemination.
it I mean it looked that way under hand lens when you saw the bigger disseminations. You see the steel gray. It's got a really distinct look and it stands out from the bornite quite well.
Okay.
Um, and it's really interesting. Right? We see the same variations in the copper sulfide speciation that we see in our veining, but in our dissemination. So locally, the disseminations will be dominantly chalcopyrite, and then there'll be a transition to bornite, and then bornite chalcocite, and then you see the bornite disseminations intergrown with what almost like it's hard to tell because they're fine, but it looks like almost exsolution lamellae between bornite and chalcopyrite, and then it'll be chalcopyrite dominant again. So you see this somewhat irregular transition of sulfide speciations, and yeah, we're not sure yet whether that's a function of a slightly later stage hypogene enrichment, or if it's just that during crystallization it's so close in equilibrium with the thermodynamic conditions of precipitating out these sulfides, um, that it's a very close relationship between the chemistry of the sulfides and the temperature conditions where these form. So yeah, there's a number of options, and it is going to take a little bit more investigation to figure out exactly what is going on, and then that's going to dictate how we approach the exploration as well. Is this a larger body? Are there fluid pathways that are resulting in enrichment? It's the orientation of these. So there's some work to do to figure this out, but we're pretty happy to have this problem to solve. It's pretty unusual, even within the NAC deposit here, to see these intervals of disseminated copper-bearing sulfides within the intrusive phase. Usually the intrusive phase hosts veins and fracture hosting, and we don't see our disseminated mineralization until we get a bit further outboard of the main babbing porphyry stock. So this rock that we have that is mineralized, very similar to the other dikes that we've encountered down deeper in bornite bearing, they cut the babbing porphyry stock. Compositionally, this rock looks distinct, and geochemically it's distinct as well, at least in XRF analysis, where we look at our zirconium and our titanium abundance. So it's another example of a later stage intrusive that is mineralized with copper sulfides.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, a couple buzzwords that I pulled out there was hypogene enrichment. Can you speak a little bit about, if that is the case? Are we seeing it associated in some zones with like a phyllic or sericitic overprint? Or can you comment a little bit about the alteration that you're seeing in these holes?
The the rock that hosts this disseminated mineralization is very, very bleached. To
Okay.
to to characterize the alteration with something pretty broad and undefined, we say it's bleached. It's quite pale. Uh, the plagioclase phenocrysts do scratch quite easily to what does look like a fine white sericite. So it does look like there's a pretty broad sericitic overprint of this. It's a really
Okay.
unique textured rock. It's this sort of classic seriate texture where you have larger phenocrysts and there isn't two defined population sizes like you would find in porphyritic, where you've got an outsized phenocryst population and you've got your finer ground mass. There's a pretty unimodal distribution of coarser phenocrysts uh, down to finer phenocrysts.
Okay. And then you
So
mentioned,
yeah,
sorry,
no,
I
I was
was
just
going to say,
saying, and within that, all those phenocrysts are quite, they're quite pale. They don't look like they're fresh plagioclase. They do look like they're quite very likely sericite altered.
okay, that's yeah, I'll have to do a write up here later on about some of my review of that, but that is actually very promising and is a known associate with primary mineralization enrichment. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And then you mentioned broad intervals. You said boxes. Is that something? Can you touch on like where we're seeing some of these intercepts? Are we talking tens of meters or hundreds of meters, or is that something you can share?
Uh, it's definitely on the scale of greater than 100 meters where we see this. Uh, so in hole 35, we get into this mineralized intrusive at about 198 meters, and we get out of it properly around 300 meters. And then there's about another 120 meters of variably mineralized, more traditional looking granodiorite stock rock. And then we're back into that intrusive uh, with very few interruptions down to a depth of around 700 meters. So
Okay.
we're talking some pretty decent scale of
Yeah, we're
mineralization.
definitely not talking about the mineralized dikes anymore. This is definitely its own intrusive set, that's for sure. Sounds like. Yeah. So I guess looking forward on the north there, will be maybe some forward guidance on any of that, or maybe some visuals on that, or are we going to look forward to that just when the news release comes out?
Um, I mean, I can speak to, we do hit the intrusive again in 38 for another greater than 100-meter intercept down deeper.
Okay.
38 was a really interesting hole. Got color from a hole 4 location, and again, it showed visual continuity of mineralization pretty well, but also not quite what we would have expected. The geometry of this is complex, and it's unclear whether there's some things offset by faulting that we're just not seeing because we're drilling at the wrong orientation potentially, or if there's just a really irregular injection of these dikes or smaller plutonic bodies of this later stage mineralized rock. But it is present, and it does look quite well mineralized in 38 as well. So again, assays are going to be key here. So we're waiting the assays for this before we dive in with both feet again and targeting more of this area up to the north, but we're really encouraged by what we've seen so far.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, visually we might have a knockout here. We'll see. And also because this is the new intrusive, we don't necessarily know what the gold will be running on any of this or Molly or otherwise, right? So of course, wait for the assays here to get more excited. But I'm pleasantly hearing disseminated chalcocite, possibly hypogene enrichment. This new package has definitely got my attention. Okay, well let's wrap up on a hypothetical. We're here at the end of the season, right? We have enough cash in hand for next year to field a similar size program. But let's say you could double that size of that program here. So we're up to four rigs total. What would you be doing? Would you be throwing all four in the north, or would you be doing a balance of half and half in the southeast and southwest side, or what would be your initial interest and approach? Or are you saying you're going to hold back and wait for the assays to make the actual call?
I mean, assays or not, what we're seeing in these rocks are indicative of you know a, a larger source for what we're seeing, right? So even if these assays come back underwhelming, which I'd be surprised, it's still indicative that there's a driving source for this, both that hydrothermal breccia we're seeing and these broader intervals of disseminated copper bearing sulfides. It warrants systematic exploration, and it warrants stepping around the stock and even within the stock, right? Like we were quite a ways within the porphyry stock when we encountered these later stage mineralized bodies that look quite compelling. So it's uh it's going to be a matter of probably a really similar approach to what we did this season, but just focusing on expanding rather than infilling. And if we had four rigs, it would be great to continue to do that infill because there's still some really good mineralization in the main zone. Like that's not, that area is not falling by the wayside. That's going to be a big part of the story here if this does proceed towards resource development, right? So this is right now it's looking like, in the absence of any other assays, I think we do more systematic testing to the north and northeast and continue testing to the south and southeast and complete the infill holes that we did. We called it short. We didn't do the infill from 25 because we wanted to use the time we had to push a bit further to the north. So be good to go back to the original plan there as well. So we've got enough encouragement to hit the ground running with at least two rigs next season. And if we expand to three or four, then it would be really good to do more systematic step outs and then maybe a few, once we've got a handle on what's going on and maybe a bit later in the season, do some bolder step outs a bit further around the porphyry stock, right? Because that is all eventually going to be tested. There's a really, really big system footprint at NAC. And how much of that is being driven or dictated by the bigger geophysical signature. Um, what we're drilling right now is deeper below that. So yeah, I think it's really just going to be systematic testing with a few strategically placed step out holes.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, there's definitely no shortage of targets, it looks like, at this project. And it's neat that every time we do end up pushing into some of the new ones, we get results like what we saw in 33 and then this development in 35 and 38. Um, yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's been another really great season. I think you guys did a really great job in the way that you approached this with regards to the systematic approach itself. I heard some people say, "Oh, we have to do bigger step outs and drill to kill this thing," but in reality, I think the approach itself has yielded, we'll say, a navigation in the junior space that not necessarily most projects can enjoy. This isn't a major operating this project. It's a team that's looking to try and deliver the most amount of value they can, and I think you guys have done a really good job of focusing in on that value. And I look forward to seeing what the end results of this year set up. Because at a high level, I think this is going to end up landing something like how 17 rolled up the last season with regards to all of a sudden the story has more legs to walk, right? So I
Yeah,
hats off to the
we
team and the excellent activities you guys have achieved this year. I hope they're ready to go for next. And yeah, I guess we'll have some more follow-up touches as assays come out. And I look keenly, like I said, aware of you know, the potential development that this northern area is starting to have on this project, right? So it's great.
Yeah, no, I want to give a big shout out to the team of geos we had on site this year. It was just a really competent bunch of guys and girls just doing really good work. And yeah, it's a lot. We were out in the field for more than 5 months, and it's hard to stay on some projects, stay positive and stay focused, but everyone did a really great job. So yeah, it made my job a lot easier. So yeah, we had such a good team in place, and yeah, it looks like we'll continue that into next season. So regardless of whether it's 2 rigs or 4 rigs even, so we'll see. I'll touch wood and hope the assays are going to be supportive of that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's chop her there. I'll shut down, and until next time, Neil, take care.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Nate.